Hello and welcome to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. I'm Alex.
I'm Julio, and thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, head over to Apple Podcasts to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Help promote the algorithm and spread the word.
You can also find us on SoundCloud to subscribe and review, and don't forget to visit our main website, wearethecontrarians.com.
Follow us on Twitter at Contrarian Prime, and to like us on Facebook, visit facebook.com/Contrarian Prime.
And if you have the willpower to keep up with our pretentious ramblings, you can follow us individually at Contrarian Alex for myself and at Ovnio for Julio. That's OVNIO.
Now, time for the podcast.
Hello, and welcome back to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. My name is Alex, and I am joined, as always, by my friend and co-host, Julio. Julio, what say you?
I say, hey, what's going on?
Did you wake up and scream that from your window? What are the lyrics to that song? You have to take a deep breath and get real high before you say what's going on.
You gotta find my top hat.
Yeah.
That's what she was wearing, right?
Yeah, Four Non-Blondes.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought that song was Melissa Etheridge for some reason until I was promptly put in my place by a friend at a bar.
Were you put in your place by a Melissa Etheridge fan or a Four Non-Blondes fan?
Four Non-Blondes. Like they took great umbrage with my I thought honest mistake, but you know, I was young and dumb once. All right, so we are here marching on, continuing the quest of Winona, the hashtag WinonaVirus 2020, Ride or Die. The summer of Winona Ryder has brought us to our first stop following our midway point.
Yeah.
Taking us back to 2011. Now, will this be our most recent inclusion, with the exception of Stranger Things? So our most recent movie, will this be the most recent one?
For the summer overall, no, because we have Homefront coming up next month, and that's after. I think that's 2013 or 2014.
Okay.
But
wait, is that the one with James Franco?
And Jason Statham.
My God. All right. I forgot of the entirety of what I signed up for here. So, but the year is 2011. Winona Ryder, fresh off her small yet important part in Black Swan. She flexed a bit of a dark muscle in that movie, and for this one here, she pivoted her funny bone, as it's the 2011 Ron Howard. Would you call this a family romp, or is this more of like a romantic comedy date night movie?
I think it falls in between, because it depends on the family, and it depends on the date.
For the family, I mean, we're talking like, you know, the kids are 13 and probably you might want to be 14 and 16 or so going with the parents, because you do have you have a man ass and you do have one fuck in this movie. So
are they? Are the parents having a talk, like a serious talk with the kids after, about just how relationships are complicated? And well, I guess you could argue that the movie does that already.
How not all Vietnamese massage parlors whack you off at the end of your massage. Yeah, it's an interesting cut for sure. It's a deep cut. It's a very fascinating entry in Ron Howard's, monolithic filmography. So I came into this fresh. I just watched this movie a few hours ago, and I'm looking forward to jumping into it. But of course, before we do so, first and foremost, if this is your first time listening to the Contrarians, we thank you for listening. If you're a returning listener, appreciate y'all too. Bear with us here while we go over our gimmick for our new listeners. We like to rage against the Rotten Tomatoes machine, as we say. Find a movie on Rotten Tomatoes that is highly rated, a lot of times known as certified fresh. Make a case for maybe why it shouldn't be. On the opposite side of that coin, find a movie that is typically 30% or below, a nasty green splotch known as rotten. Make a case for its positive merit, being that the dilemma is at 24% on the old RT. We're going to be talking about maybe why the critics misunderstood this one.
I'm going to point out every single thing that Ron Howard and his stellar cast do right.
A-listers all the way.
Yeah, I mean, you start with Clint Howard, and then you just You never stop.
And if you want to know how we really feel about the movie, stick around for the second portion of the podcast, the aptly titled A Real Talk. Also, if this is your first time listening, the Summer of Winona is not our over 120-30 episodes are not all Winona Ryder movies. This is a specialty that we sometimes tackle certain actors or themes in movies, and this being the case for the summer of 2020, the Summer of Winona.
Yeah.
But before we get into the rigmarole of it all, Julio, I see you wearing your dunce cap. It sounds like you were shamed publicly on Twitter.
Yes. The good thing is that it proves that people are listening. Not even just listening, they're paying attention, so they can call us out whenever we make a blunder. And the blunder was made. As we hit the midpoint of the Summer of Winona, and we got so caught up in Bram Stoker's Dracula and talking about Francis Ford Coppola's career, and I would say in my defense, I did say that I was not as familiar with his filmography as with other filmmakers that are his contemporaries, but I mistakenly said multiple times that Cosmopolis was directed by Francis Ford Coppola, going as far as saying that I watched maybe half of it before falling asleep, so I couldn't really say if it was good or not. That last part is true, but it turns out that, as our good friend from Spit and Polish, Ryan, pointed out, Cosmopolis was actually directed by David Cronenberg, who has turned out to be more prolific than Coppola in the long run.
I'm also disappointed I didn't call you out on that. Jason X's David Cronenberg, by the way.
Yes. I was going to with The Fly's David Cronenberg, but Jason X is probably more popular.
Contemporary, more modern crowd. You know?
Yes. The crowd pleaser, Jason X. So, it doesn't mean, I mean, the main point remains, which is
Cosmopolis is boring.
Well, that's still to be decided. Like I said, I was tired, but Francis Ford Coppola hasn't really made anything that has been even close to being mainstream since, when I looked it up this time, not recalling from memory, just so I get it right, he did Jack with Robin Williams, then he did The Rainmaker with Matt Damon and Danny DeVito, and then there's like 3 or 4 movies that it's like, well, I don't remember hearing about it. And like I told you, Alex, he has an announced movie called Megalopolis, and that might be something that subconsciously I just associated with. But anyway, if you've seen any of those low-key, fairly recent Coppola releases from the last, decade, even 2 decades, I guess, let us know, because I'm very curious if they feel like Francis Ford Coppola movies, if they feel like, I don't know, like he's experimenting now. I don't know. I'm sure that the one thing is they won't feel like Cronenberg movies. So when you watch Cosmopolis, keep that in mind.
I was talking to my dad about Bram Stoker's Dracula over the weekend. He did not know it was directed by Francis Ford Coppola. And as I'm learning right now, Francis Ford Coppola was the producer of American Graffiti. I did not know that.
Yeah, they're all a tight-knit group. I'm trying to remember which. I might have been that Spielberg documentary that HBO had a while ago, where it had footage of basically all the greats just hanging out at a Denny's when they were just getting started. It was like Spielberg, Lucas, Coppola. I don't remember if Scorsese was there. De Palma was there for sure.
The Rat Pack.
Yeah.
And Polanski was on his way out the door without having paid. He was just trying to flee the scene. American Graffiti, produced by Francis Ford Coppola, but starring Ron Howard, who would later go on to be a director, making his directorial debut.
Fantastic transition. I am in awe.
1984, 5 maybe, with the classic Night Shift. Would fast forward several years to 2011 with The Dilemma, as brings us here, not just starring Winona Ryder, not just starring Jennifer Connelly, not just starring Kevin James, not just starring Vince Vaughn, but also Channing Tatum, and receiving the perennial and credit, her career signature, Queen Latifah. So we're dealing with a murderer's row here. So the release was January, let's see here. I mean, you're already off to a bad start with the January.
January, we're Where good movies go to die.
It was January 14th of 2011 when The Dilemma dropped into theaters, again directed by Ron Howard, written by Alan Lucy? I don't know. Making a return to the podcast after Here Comes the Boom.
Is this our third Kevin James movie now?
Yes.
He's entering the Ben Affleck ranks.
Yeah,
now.
I think this is gonna quell our James ratio, or quota rather, for the duration of the Contrarians, no matter how long it lasts. Because I can't think of any other movie of his I really want to sit through again. That being said, I do really like Here Comes the Boom, and when we'll get to real talk, I definitely have some feelings about this movie. But for the purposes of Contrarians Corner, we're dealing with a 24%er here, Julio. So the critics weren't exactly, setting fireworks off out in the street. They weren't exactly, fawning over themselves for this.
No, there's a lot. I actually, because sometimes I'll get the quotes pretty early on. I don't have to go through all of them. This time I went through all of them because I was looking for at least one critic that mentioned Winona Ryder in their quote, this being The Summer of Winona. Did not find it on the negative side. There's one that mentions on the positive side, thankfully. So we'll get there on the second half of the show. But right now, we'll start with Mike Scott from Times-Picayune, who says, there are lacklusters. Might be. There are lackluster movies Vince Vaughn can charm into being better. There are mediocre scripts Ron Howard can will some life into. The Dilemma just isn't one of them. Christian Toto from What Would Toto Watch said, the only thing missing from this light comedy of misunderstandings is Mr. Furley and a scene set in the Regal Beagle. Were you a big Three's Company fan, Alex? Because I was. I think I've mentioned it in the show. Yeah,
I know you have, but no, that went right over my head.
That's how it feels whenever you talk wrestling to me.
There you go.
But yeah, the Regal Beagle was the bar where they were regulars at. It was their cheers, and Mr. Furley was Don Knotts, the landlord.
Oh, okay.
And Three's Company. Every other episode, there was some sort of wacky misunderstanding that could be easily fixed by somebody just saying the right thing. But of course, you had to expand it. Marshall Fine from Hollywood and Fine says, suffers from the...
God, boo!
He says, suffers from the mistaken impression that it's a comedy. Instead, it's merely a template for a comedy handed to a group of people who obviously had no idea what to do with it. I think that everybody here has a track record that proves that they know what to do with a template for a comedy.
Yeah, I mean, Jennifer Connelly was in Requiem for a Dream, which, God bless her, she's such a talented actress, but that's one of those movies that just has stayed with me forever. Anytime I see her, I just remember how bad things got for her in that movie.
Well, it's meant to stay with you forever, though. Don't do drugs, kids.
Yeah, you'll end up. Let's not go there.
You'll end up pining after Vince Vaughn, who does not deserve you.
At best, that's how you'll end up.
Elliot Noble from Sky Cinema says, this is a sort of setup that would have been perfectly nailed in a single episode of Friends. Difference would have been that Queen Latifah wouldn't have been part of it.
No. Maybe. No, Friends doesn't take anything seriously enough. We have multiple Oscar clips in this movie, and there's never been any really true good acting on Friends.
Oh, that is harsh.
Said it. Bruce Willis was good on Friends.
That's even harsher, I think. Not the main cast, just a guy that's known for not having cared for over 20 years, I think. But he happens to be the highlight. And finally, because we always have to have one of these, Roger Tennis from cinemaclips.com says, finding humor in this humorless situation is the dilemma.
The Hollywood and Fine or whatever was still worse than that.
Even without a pun.
No.
Well, as you might have noticed, dear listeners, if you've been keeping up with the Summer of Winona, no clip on this half, and spoiler alert, no clip on the second half, because even though I put out the call, nobody wanted to either watch or rewatch this movie in order to give us a clip. But don't worry, Rotten Tomatoes came to the rescue.
Rendered everyone laconic. It's just such an overpowering movie that everyone was rendered speechless by it. And much like Requiem for a Dream, it's one that people don't, that's a Pandora's box that people don't want to open back up. They're, the flood of emotions that'll come back from it.
They've been buried them so deep, they're afraid of what's going to happen when, 2011, it's been almost 10 years. So that shit's been festering inside you. Your resentment over the way that some characters are treated here.
So, as I mentioned, the main thing to call out from the opening credits of this movie is Queen Latifah gets the "and" credit, which I think was her. I'm not sure of a movie she didn't get the "and" credit for from like 2008 to 2012. Maybe there was like that 4-year period where she was the 5th-year senior that just got all the props from everybody on all the projects she took part in.
So she got the Oscar nomination. I don't think she won, right, for Chicago. I don't remember when was that, but I wonder if that's when she got moved into the "and" club, or if that's what got her out of the "and" club and into just being
Chicago certainly would have been before this. I think she was just such a respected titan of the industry at this point that the respect had to be paid.
Yeah, you're an Oscar winner. You get the "and" credit. If you're Queen Latifah, you get it, even if you only have 2 scenes in the movie.
So we start off with a couple's date. Our respective couples are Jennifer Connelly and Vince Vaughn, and Kevin James and the woman of the hour, the feature attraction of this summer, Winona Ryder. And they're just buddies. But before we go into that, Julio, one other thing, not just after the actor credits were through, and Queen Latifah, did you notice who did the score for this movie?
No, I didn't.
Hans Zimmer. You got Gladiator, you got Inception, The Dark Knight, basically, the whole Nolan roll call, and then you got The Dilemma, which I truthfully, I didn't notice too much of the score in this movie, but I think that just speaks to Hans Zimmer's brilliance of how understated it was.
Yeah, you could have. This is definitely the kind of movie that could be where you could go over the top with the score, because like you said, there's a lot of Oscar moments. You could just really, really dig into the power of that music can add to a scene. But I think that's awesome that Zimmer restrained himself to the point that his work is unrecognizable. That's not everybody can do that.
He doesn't hit any of his regular beats on this. I think this was like Neil Young had the Shocking Pink album, his rockabilly album, kind of his like side hustle that everyone kind of forgets, his forgotten, his hidden gem is the phrase I'm looking for, and I think that applies to Hans Zimmer.
The Dilemma is everybody's hidden gem. If you were involved in The Dilemma, that's the B-side that you bring out after most of the people have left the party.
So your ears are on fire with Hans Zimmer's score here as we see, or as we meet Ronnie and Nick, I believe is Kevin James. Yes. Ronnie and Nick, they're college buddies. Right off the bat, we're reflecting upon old times. We're joking around. We got some dancing going. I mean, Ron Howard comes at you fast and heavy in the beginning. We're not even 5 minutes into the movie, and we got full-on Kevin James dancing. We had to wait like 45 minutes in Paul Blart to get that.
Yeah. When he finally dances in Hitch, which was something that they had teased in the trailer for Hitch, I'm sure you remember, it was pretty underwhelming. I think maybe because they just ran the joke to the ground during the trailers. Here, you had no idea that you were in for this. And I think maybe even if they shown you the trailer, you are so... it takes a while for your mind to process.
In awe of how he landed Winona Ryder?
Exactly. Yes, that's probably my favorite aspect of the movie is how the movie messes with your head the entire time regarding the Kevin James Winona Ryder situation. Because, yeah, your first reaction is like, how did that happen? And then eventually you settle in, oh, well, that's because it's a movie, right? And that's what movies do. But then after a while, the movie makes you realize that, well, no, what you would think would happen in this scenario in real life happens in the movie. And we'll get there. But basically, let's just say that you can't be Kevin James, land Winona Ryder, and then rest in your laurels.
I was just about to say rest on your laurels.
Yeah.
You can't, yeah. You gotta, speaking of Neil Young, you can't just fucking play Sugar Mountain or Cortez the Killer over and over again if you're Kevin James. You gotta dig deep into your bag of tricks.
You have to be Here Comes the Boom, Kevin James.
Yes.
Non-stop, 24/7. That's the price you pay for being married to Winona Ryder.
You have to be a player on NBA Jam that scored 3 times in a row and the ball is smoking in your hand. You have to be on fire just constantly. So, Kevin James, Winona Ryder, married in this movie, Nick and Geneva. And then on the other side of this dilemmic equation, we have Vince Vaughn, again, Ronnie, and Jennifer Connelly as Beth. Nick and Geneva are married, whereas Ronnie and Beth are just a couple, but the sparks are there. It's called out several times quickly into the movie that he needs to go ahead and propose to her. They even talk about it following this night at the bar. They go back to his massive Chicago apartment and play ping pong, and even manages to work in a Floyd Mayweather dig, which I appreciated. Did you recognize that name when he said that?
I knew he was a boxer.
Hey, there you go. That's at least a... So his joke was, "You're dancing around me. It's like playing Floyd Mayweather," where like the Floyd Mayweather's skill set as he's always been a defensive boxer. He's amazing to watch, but people criticize him for not being offensive and very exciting. He doesn't really knock people out too often. So it was a smart reference.
I assumed that whenever Floyd Mayweather wins a fight, he does a little dance. That was my assumption. I kind of got it. It still worked. Yeah. I did laugh.
There you go.
She's too cool for him, though. It's the same setup as Winona and Kevin James, because this is, and I think they actually call him out. This is not Vince Vaughn from Swingers. This is Vince Vaughn in his 40s. He is
Fred Claus.
Yeah, this is Fred Claus, Vince Vaughn. He needs to settle down if he wants to land a nice girl, and I don't think it gets any nicer than Jennifer Connelly in this movie. She puts up with this bullshit. She is incredibly supportive. She's super cool. Does not put any pressure on him about the relationship. All the pressure about getting married is in his head and coming from his friends. So that's the beauty of it, because we can see that she's too cool for him. He fears that she's too cool for him, and basically when the relationship he idolizes, which is the one of Kevin James and Winona Ryder, when that relationship starts falling apart, well, of course it's going to make him feel insecure about his own relationship. So I think that's smarter than most people and most critics certainly were giving the movie credit for.
So Nick and Ronnie, friends in real life, but they're also business partners. They're attempting to enter this venture in which they sell... or basically they figure out the technology to provide an electric engine inside of old model vehicles, basically citing that, the look of electric vehicles, as it were, is not the most exciting, which I agree with. You ever see like a Tesla or something? I'm just like, why? I'd much rather just drive a fucking Volkswagen van. But
I mean, I think that you can, and that's what they're trying to do. You can meet halfway there between the people that like the big, loud, like, hey, I'm gonna make a lot of noise and create a lot of get a lot of attention when I'm driving, those type of cars, and the people that like the environment friendly, quiet. I'm just gonna kind of like bzz past you in my hybrid type of cars. And he's like, you can have a car that's environmentally friendly, but also a car that just makes you feel like, like you're growing chest hair as you're driving it. And, I don't know if this was next on your bullet points, Alex, but I do not want to shy away from just how this is not, as you like to say, this is not your dad's Ron Howard. This is Ron Howard kind of just delving deeper and darker. And the fact that he just has his protagonist making controversial gay jokes in the first reel of the movie, maybe, that's not what you would expect from him.
So before we get there, as Julio has gotten to, they do have a pitch meeting with some execs at can't remember if it was Dodge. I don't even know if they name what the vehicle company is. For legal purposes, that's probably for the best. But we meet Queen Latifah here. But before we get there, on their cab ride over to their meeting, did you at all pick up on the Kevin James theme here?
The Miracle hockey thing?
So they played Detroit Rock City by Kiss on the way over, which I'm pretty sure has been featured in both of the other Kevin James movies we've done. I know for a fact he sings at karaoke in Paul Blart. I want to say it's in Here Comes the Boom, but I'm not sure. It must be Kevin James's favorite song or something. I'm pretty sure they used it on King of Queens at some point. That song's really fucked up, by the way. That's not a good song to like have as your favorite song. It's like, have you ever listened to it, or do you know anything about it?
I just know, I recognize it when it comes on.
A little bit of real talk for you. It's essentially about a guy that gets, like, he's really excited and he's going to party and he gets drunk before this concert, and on the way there he dies because he's drunk and he wrecks his car. So,
Is the video Eminem reading his letter?
Yeah. It's certainly not your grandpa's Kiss song. It's not rock and roll all night and party every day. But I just found that as soon as the riff picked up, I was like, wait a minute. I've been in this situation with Kevin James before. So Detroit Rock City carries us into the internal of the cab where they talk about Ronnie getting engaged to Beth. And he talks about, I'm going to buy a ring. And this is where we find out that Ronnie is a recovering gambler, because he mentions that he met a guy, and hilariously, it's a Hasidic man that he met in Gamblers Anonymous that's going to sell him a $20,000 ring for $10. So just keep that in your back pocket. If you got like a work shirt on, just tuck it into the front pocket there with your pen. Just remember that Vince Vaughn's got a gambling problem in this movie. So they get to the meeting, and when pitching their idea, as Julio mentioned, we have, I think he does his best to distinguish it's not a homophobic rant when he calls electric cars gay. He makes allusions to, belt up to your, over your stomach, chaperone at the school dance. He basically tries to use the word gay like a 7th or 8th grader would in a business meeting. Which, as gregarious as Vince Vaughn is, and as charming and as enchanting, even for him, I think this is he's shown a little too much ass.
Yeah, well, but see, this is what I appreciate, which is that's the kind of sequence that opens up a conversation, because it's not directly aggressive towards the gay community or towards homophobes. But it just gets you started on. I think that the people that would take offense about it would take offense from it, and the people who wouldn't understand why anybody would take offense from it. This is a starting point. You get a charming young man, or a charming man in his 40s, like Vince Vaughn.
He's a young man.
I mean,
he doesn't look it, but he is.
He's a rock where we can all agree that this is good. So this is where we start, and from there. There's a dialogue. Too much of today's society is about just the moment that you're offended, you just cut the conversation off. But here was Ron Howard trying to use a dark comedy about relationships and infidelities to also expand the conversation to other areas.
Stew on it. So instead of, following that, going down that rabbit hole, not even rabbit hole, just following that path, that fork in the road, that end pass, he hits you with like a 90-degree angle, not quite a 180, but it's just like boom, like a veer off, a hard right, as I've said before. And that Queen Latifah is like the Stifler character in this movie. Like, you don't expect her to be, but she's like the raunchy, inappropriate, very phallic heavy side character that was, very popularized at the turn of the millennium in movies like American Pie and Road Trip. Essentially, she's the turn of the millennium Sean William Scott in The Dilemma.
Hey, representation matters, man.
It does. And she talks about Ladywood, which I had never heard that expression before. And I'm going to be honest, I don't hate it.
Yeah, it's certainly a refreshing spin on just a trope of a character by now. Like you said, the oversexed white man that all he can do is talk in double entendres and just be very sexually overt. Seen that, over it. But Queen Latifah making those kind of jokes, I'm there.
The only thing we were missing was Queen Latifah going, I know what's next. Vegas. That's the post-credit scene, actually. You got to hang around for it. So Ronnie is preparing the arrangements for proposing to Beth. He goes to like this botanical garden. We get our obligatory, in many ways mandatory Clint Howard cameo here, and he runs the gardens or whatnot. And he just tells him, stay off the plants, yada, yada, yada. He wanders off because he's trying to prepare something. I think he's checking to see if they have like an outlet for his iPod or some shit.
Yeah.
And then we see Miss Winona Ryder wandering around the premises with a wild Channing Tatum appears and just looking as disheveled and still fine as the day is long. And Vince Vaughn kind of from afar, he solid snakes and sneaks around and, keeps an eye on him and finds them kissing. And of course, this naturally provides him with a moral dilemma. But we have to remember that this is a comedy, of course. So Clint Howard catches him peeping Tom and says, "What are you doing? Get down." And he slips and falls face first into a pile of plants. And we then find out that those plants are poisonous. So.
I'm surprised that he didn't fall sooner because that kiss is a whopper.
Dude, they go in.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure like Ron Howard had already called cut, but like going into it, I think it was one of those things of like they just looked at each other. Like, you look like you, and I look like me. There's no reason we shouldn't get the most out of this.
That is either fantastic acting or just the luck of Ron Howard of just being able to capture that moment of pure lust, like actual lust.
Unadulterated, just machismo, just carnal passion. And I mean, to be fair, that's good for both of them. In either that situation, sucking face with Winona Ryder or Channing Tatum, it's win-win.
Yeah, I was just very happy that it felt genuine. It's such an important plot point that I needed to believe it, and they went for it. Winona was kissing Channing Tatum, not just like, I'm kissing Channing Tatum, but it's also like,
I'm having an affair.
I'm kissing Channing Tatum after having kissed Kevin James for, I don't know how long they'd been married. But
it's like The Wedding Singer when they talk about how you're supposed to kiss on the altar, not porno tongue. Yes. This is porno tongue.
There's the build-up. I know I can't stop talking about it, but because I remember watching the trailer before I even watched the movie all back in the day, and the trailer showed you the kiss, and me thinking that kiss was unsettling because that was my first, I guess, experience watching Winona Ryder as an adult, and I was like, that's not how she kissed Ethan Hawke.
She's all grown up.
Kiss. Yeah.
Now. So Vince Vaughn naturally is very off-put by this, and it's already starting to shoot up red flags because he doesn't want to tell anybody. He can't bring himself to even tell Beth, which... so she's suspicious. Like, how the fuck did you get this rash? And then he's explaining to it, and the giant wad of cash he was going to use to buy the engagement ring falls out. And she's like, "Why are you carrying this cash around?" And Vince Vaughn, he talks like a fucking speed addict or a coke addict normally. So when under any sort of duress, it's just going to, exacerbate all that. So... Beth is already suspicious of what's going on. He's haunted by this. He goes to see Nick the next day as they're working on the cars, and he can't bring himself to tell him. This is basically where the dilemma has a dilemma, because he's already got the problem of telling him, but then he realizes if he tells him right now, it'll derail all their progress of what they're working on. So he's dealing with the guilt of having this information, but then on top of it, the guilt of not telling him to try to yield positive results from him. And he knows the whole situation of the car and the deadline and the progress is weighing on him. One of the parts I actually legitimately belly laughed at. Contrarians Corner, Real Talk or Not, there were like 4 parts in this movie where I legit belly laughed at something boisterously. And he, I guess he has an ulcer or something. And he asks him, he's like drinking a bottle of Pepsid or something. And he's like, the ulcer acting up? And he's like, "Oh no, this medicated chalky shit, really refreshing."
Yeah, Kevin James is not really being super comical in this movie because
he's really not.
Yeah, he's just so stressed through most of the runtime. Other than the dancing sequence that we mentioned in the opening, most of the time he's just miserable. And he still manages to be funny, but he's not doing the Kevin James stuff. He's not. He's
still funny, just not ha funny.
Well, he's not with the usual. He's not King of Queens, Paul Blart, Kevin James.
No,
there's an intensity to his character that I actually enjoy.
He's Gil from The Simpsons. He's always a little bit sweaty and a little bit stressed out, and life's it's weighing on him a bit too hard. So Vince Vaughn has no one to talk about the situation. So naturally, he just strikes up a convo with a few patrons at a bank when he's going to deposit some money, and makes a bunch of sports analogies, specifically to basketball, about well, if he knew his wife was cheating on him, would you tell him? It's like, well, it depends on what the game is. And So, the real world gets it. It's all a matter of sports analogies.
Well, I mean, I'm just glad that Ron Howard was smart enough to give us that sequence and the sequence that follows to really make sure that we're all on the same page and we all understood why he hadn't told Kevin James. Because if you don't understand why he hasn't told Kevin James, the rest of the movie doesn't work.
No.
You're just going to spend the next hour screaming, just tell him. But
oh, no, it's brilliant. Yeah, because you understand like all aspects of his dilemma at that point.
It's game 7.
Yeah, there you go. So from the discussion of basketball to the sport of hockey, we transition to a Chicago Blackhawks game that they attend. I believe they play at the United Center, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, they do. And gonna be completely honest, Winona Ryder and Jennifer Connelly in hockey jerseys was doing something for me. And I'm not even a Blackhawks guy. Those were Dallas Stars jerseys. Put the kids to bed. So this actually really caught me by surprise that I expected the movie to at least like cycle through a few more comedic hijinks or like awkwardness before this. Vince Vaughn just straight up confronts her. She gets up to go buy a beer and he just gets up and he's like, "What the hell are you doing?" Just walks up to her and gives her all kinds of shit about it. And basically just comes at her like with, a fuck you attitude. Like, how could you do this type of thing? And then Winona just, I wouldn't say she was prepared for it. She's definitely shocked at first, but then she just like claps back at him. It's like, you don't understand what the fuck it's like to be married. And she's like, like, Nick hasn't had sex with me in 6 months. And she mentions that he goes and gets handies from the Vietnamese massage parlor. And you can tell Vince Vaughn is still going to stick to his guns and he's still very much convinced that he's in the right, but this definitely throws him for a loop.
Yeah, she did not fall apart the way that he thought that she was going to.
Yeah.
It's like,
and that's what surprised me too.
I'm a giant. Winona Ryder is tiny and she's in the wrong because she's cheating. So of course she's going to fold. And instead she manages to buy herself some time, which was pretty impressive considering... because at this point, I mean, I would imagine most of the people watching, especially if you're a guy, you are on Vince Vaughn's side the entire time. So you want everything to come out in the open. But she manages to make an argument that makes sense to where he basically agrees to not tell Kevin James and let her tell him, but not right away because he needs to finish the work. And,
yeah, after the work is concluded.
And she's just not going to see Channing Tatum anymore. And
yeah,
they know each other. They've known each other for years. So he goes along with it, and you can't blame him. It's like if you were in that position, you probably do the same.
Well, and from the perspective of the movie, also, it really genuinely surprised me because it goes from being like a dude movie, like yeah, dudes, to proposing that it's not black and white. It's like a smear of gray. Like the situation is not exactly what it seems, and that yeah, I'm in the wrong, but I have reasons for doing what I'm doing. It's not like it doesn't slut shame her, basically, is the phrase I'm looking for.
Right, because let's be honest, the movie didn't need to give Winona Ryder extra reasons to hook up with Channing Tatum when she's married to Kevin James. You didn't need to explain it, right? But they go ahead and make it more complex.
They had rammed as much gunpowder in the cannon as possible. So Kevin James, we get some like side conversations. He said he's disappointed that Ronnie hasn't proposed to Beth yet. Ronnie asked Nick, like, you ever get massages? And Nick is very precocious about the discussion and very secretive about it. So naturally, all of Vince Vaughn's paranoia at this point, I think he wants to see that she's right, just to kind of weigh out the two sides. So he follows Kevin James to some Vietnamese massage parlor in downtown Chicago, and he doesn't confront him about him, but he confirms that he's lying about where he is. He calls me. He's like, where are you? He's like, oh, I'm back at home, Mad Men Marathon. And so Vince Vaughn knows at this point that Geneva is not lying.
Well, I mean, we never really find out if Kevin James is actually getting hand jobs at that place. But the evidence doesn't, circumstantial
He's confronted
evidence.
with it at the end of the movie, and he definitely does nothing to refute it.
Yeah.
He just does the, psh, what? So Ronnie then tells Geneva, hey, you weren't lying, but she's with Channing Tatum again. Zip is his name in the movie. And so he freaks out about that. He's like, I thought you were going to break it off. And this is where we get the one fuck in the movie. He says something like, well, fucking, you don't fucking have to, or something. It caught me by surprise. I had to go check. I was like, wait, is this movie R? So Winona Ryder's like, well, no, you're not going to tell him because, you know, we need to talk first. So they meet up at this coffee shop, and like, this scene is so awesome, just of like how vindictive Winona Ryder, Geneva character is. We find out that they had hooked up in college before she even met Nick, before Kevin James was even part of the equation. So she holds that over his head. But then she like is like, you're not going to tell him, because if you do, I'm just going to tell him that you've been making passes at me and that, you know, you've been trying to hook up with me. And then she starts crying and starts saying what she would tell him. And Vince Vaughn is just sitting there like me, like with my mouth open, like, oh my God, women are awesome. Like with their emotional manipulation and their ability to just turn it on. But my notes just say Winona annihilates Ronnie. She does. She's just like, you're a fucking loser. No one's going to believe you if you say anything. It's a total power move by her, and it's an awesome scene.
It was reminiscent of the Edward Norton clip that they showed at the Oscars for Birdman, where he's acting the scene for Michael Keaton, the scene from their play, but then when the scene is over, he just looks up at him and smiles and goes, wasn't that good? Because here Winona ends her pretend confession after she's crying, and she doesn't smile. She just goes like, see, I can fuck you over if I want to. It's
yeah, she like sniffs and like stops her tears, and she just kind of like looks at him like, checkmate.
So this is so far the most villainous Winona Ryder we've had this summer. We've always been rooting for her one way or another, and even when she was doing things that were not cool, we still kind of wanted her to
like
prevail.
The entire movie Lost Souls.
Well, that's on a very meta version of the argument. But here, this is just, she's still a complex character, but she is definitely more of a villain after this scene. And I appreciate it because I think that Ron Howard and the screenwriter, Alan Loeb, they looked at Winona's career and they realized that it was time to play this sort of variation of the character. We've done, up till now, we've done 6 Winona Ryder movies. And in 3 of those movies, she is duplicitous towards men. You have Mr. Deeds, where she fakes caring for Adam Sandler in order to take advantage of him. You have Reality Bites, where she's basically dating Ben Stiller and Ethan Hawke at the same time. And then you have just the last episode, Bram Stoker's Dracula, where she's cheating on Keanu Reeves with vampire Gary Oldman. Here, this is the first time this summer, and maybe the first time in her entire career, where she is, once again, basically, she's with Kevin James and with Channing Tatum at the same time, but we're not supposed to be on her side. She's finally the villain. It must have been pretty refreshing for Winona to be able to just play it as somebody who's not asking to be sympathetic about it, and also just for the audiences to finally be like, oh, this is going on, and it's okay for me to be mad at her.
This segues into what, in my opinion, is Vince Vaughn's Oscar clip. After all this, he's sitting on a bench on the streets of Chicago, and he literally is talking to God, about he doesn't know what to do, and and he starts crying, which like I know we've done like single tear Vince Vaughn before, but we've never done like quivering lip, voice cracking Vince Vaughn before. So this was range with a capital R, I think, was what was on the script here. And I don't know. Was there anything else you had dog-eared as the Oscar clip in the movie?
Well, there's...
Or Vince Vaughn's Oscar clip, I should say.
I mean, you mentioned it earlier. Once you get to the last 20 minutes or so of the movie, it's almost like everybody gets their chance. The spotlight is there.
Yeah. Like, this is one of the few movies we've ever done where, like, I actually have in my notes what the best picture clip is. It could be used for best picture, best screenplay clip. Because, like, it's not just, like, one individual powerful performance. It's the sum of its parts.
Is it the intervention?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We'll get there. But yeah, no, I thought so too. I thought that it's not just that it's a good performance from Vince Vaughn and that it just shakes you because you didn't see it coming. It's also that the movie very, very masterfully is getting darker and darker. It's kind of like what you were saying. You were expecting a very specific type of movie based on the trailer and based on the starting setup of it's gonna be so funny that he saw Winona Ryder cheating on Kevin James, and now he's not gonna know what to do, and hijinks ensue. But then very quickly it's turned to something darker, where it becomes very clear that people are getting hurt, and more people are gonna get hurt before the end of the movie. You don't just bring out the tears in your average Vince Vaughn comedy, not like this.
No, yeah, not halfway through the movie. Like this is right before the climax type thing. It's a different movie we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
So Queen Latifah reemerges for a moment of exposition in the movie where she explains to Vince Vaughn, who eventually parlays that information to Kevin James, that the deal's been rushed up and they have to have something to present in 3 days. So they're on a 3-day notice here, and naturally that just adds more stress to the overall situation.
She makes exposition colorful by also throwing in a deep throat joke, which I laughed. I didn't belly laugh.
Oh, yeah. She's like, I'm your deep throat. It's a great movie. Have you seen it? And doesn't Vince Vaughn say, what, All the President's Men?
I mean, that made me laugh, but then also just Queen Latifah's just very casual response. She's like, no, deep throat the movie. And then she's like, it's good. And then they just keep walking. Just her, it's good. That facial expression was pretty funny.
Just so casual. Ronnie knows the situation with Zip and Geneva's still going on, so he's going to do a little bit of blackmail, or more of just, I guess, to have some concrete proof. He goes and buys a nice camera, and on his way to, he gets a call. He's just becoming all paranoid. He gets a call from a man asking to speak to Beth, and prefers not to leave a message. And so he's obviously, with the situation at hand, he's paranoid that Beth could be committing acts of infidelity as well. So he gets his camera, goes over and stokes out Zip's apartment. Clear body doubles, but still pretty provocative for a PG-13 movie.
Well, are you telling me that that's not Channing Tatum's ass?
I don't think so.
Why?
I've seen the first Magic Mike. I think he shows his ass. Which one has Matthew McConaughey shows his ass? Which one's that?
The first one.
Okay, yeah, that's the one I've seen. That's just Man-Ass the movie, pretty much. And
I mean, it was meant to be.
Man, I don't know. It could be Channing Tatum's ass, but whatever the case, yeah, kind of borderline graphic stuff.
It's pretty steamy.
Yeah.
Makes sense, because you have to follow up on that kiss that we saw earlier. If they were pretty tame on their sexing now, then it would feel fake.
Oh, absolutely. It's just basically establishing it's a, I used the word carnal earlier. It's a very sexual relationship, because that's kind of what she's lacking. Passion is the word.
She told Vince Vaughn that Kevin James hadn't had sex with her in 6 months, which, I mean, okay, man, I'm sorry. You don't deserve it.
No, that's some, out of all the stuff in this movie that I was like, man, this actually kind of hits close to home, or not home, but more of a, there's a sheen to this that's not just Hollywood bullshit. There's actually some reality to these situations. When she said that, I was like, Hollywood bullshit. I fucking Rise of Skywalker was more believable than that part of this movie.
Before we lose it though, did you get the feeling, I don't know, I've never been in the position where I have to fucking climb on a tree and take peeping Tom pictures of people having sex through their window, but I got the feeling that this is the kind of thing that these days you could just do with your phone.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I understand. I like the overzealousness of Vince Vaughn, because I would like to think that even in 2011, you didn't need to buy that kind of camera. iPhones were not what they are now, but you could still, he's not taking those pictures for publication. They don't have to be HD. All that needs to happen is Kevin James has to be able to recognize his wife there. I
would hope he wasn't planning on like making a portfolio to give to Kevin James.
He can't help himself. He's a showman. That's part of his job.
That's your wife, reverse cowgirl.
Look at that smiley tattoo on Channing Tatum's ass. Perfectly in focus.
Look at these abs. You haven't had those ever. So this all leads to a Vince Vaughn Channing Tatum fight scene where I think Ron Howard had watched a couple of Judd Apatow movies going into this, because he basically just, whatever was filmed for this fight scene made it into the movie. He was just injecting kind of a new age feel to it. Like, he knew the audiences had been conditioned. I believe This Is 40 had already come out at this point, or it was right around the corner. But Funny People had definitely come out. So he knew the audiences needed periods of time where the scene just keeps going so they can reset. So whatever he filmed for this made its way into the movie.
But I like it. I think it works much better than any Apatow movies because to me, what it brought to mind and I know I like this movie more than you do, but the Iron Man versus Hulk fight from Age of Ultron, where it goes on for a while, but it also happens in stages because first. Winona Ryder's out of the picture, and just as Vince Vaughn is collecting his cameras about to go, he gets dragged into the apartment by Channing Tatum, and they have a fight there in the living room. And then it moves into the bathroom, where Channing Tatum is using his skateboard, I think, to break the door, and then Vince Vaughn comes out with a flamethrower.
He pulls the Rorschach, kicks the door down, and the high point, or I guess the high spot of this fight is when he breaks Channing Tatum's aquarium and his fish spill out everywhere.
Yeah, slow motion. And then they move outside where Channing Tatum is hiding and Vince Vaughn goes on a rant. And then when Vince Vaughn's about to leave, Channing Tatum reappears and then gets the upper hand again. So it's just like at least 4 different setups where this fight is happening, where you don't really know who's going to win and you don't know what the winner is going to do. Because by the time that Vince Vaughn is screaming on the streets that he's going to kill Channing Tatum, I believe him. He looks unhinged. So
he definitely did go insane.
Yeah, Ron Howard and Alan Loeb have done a pretty good job of teaching me that anything goes in this movie. So it could happen. Vince Vaughn's life could get even worse if he actually murders the guy that's sleeping with his best friend's wife. So I actually like it. Does it go on for longer than average? Yes, but it does while saying something.
So the fight finally concludes, and Vince Vaughn rushes over. The event of the evening is Beth's parents' 40th anniversary dinner, and so he goes in, sees Winona Ryder in there, sees Geneva, quickly makes it known that he knows what she's up to. Eventually leads to him giving this toast about honesty. Again, goes on a bit long, but all of this somehow culminates with Beth and Ronnie getting in a fight just because he can't come clean about what's going on. And, he admits to some of his paranoia from this call previously. We learn it was a potential business deal for Jennifer Connelly. She's worried that, his gambling addictions are going to flare back up again. And heavy lies the crown in this case for Vince Vaughn. And he just knows, the man who knew too much is... that was the working name of this movie, is Vince Vaughn just explains, hey, I'm just going to sleep on the couch at the office. He's
making the same mistakes that I guess at some point Kevin James made in his marriage. Just walking away from a beautiful, smart woman when she's actually making an effort to talk to him about his shit. Because she comes in with the most reasonable position, tone. She's not being confrontational. She's just asking for an explanation because anybody can see that he's just falling apart for some reason. This is, by the way, his speech that is prime Vince Vaughn, which we've been getting kind of much like we did with Kevin James. We've been getting a more intense Vince Vaughn, but this feels like the Vince Vaughn that kind of just riffs a lot and in a good way. This was one of my belly laughs when he's using the relationship of Jennifer Connelly's parents as an example, and he basically implies that Jennifer Connelly's mom might have cheated on her dad with the pool boy. And she's like, if that had happened, I'm not saying it did, but if that had happened, they would have talked about it because honesty is important. And it should have been like, hey, I have needs.
Yeah, it was definitely Vince Vaughn 101, just riffing. And we've talked about Vince Vaughn ad nauseum on the podcast. Go back to our Fred Claus episode. We just talk about that movie is just unadulterated Vince Vaughn for 2 hours. Close to it here, but at least it's cut with a little bit of other A-listers. Several days later, Ronnie returns to Zip's apartment. Channing Tatum answers the door with a gun just pointed at his face. Channing Tatum, I think, as we learned from the 21 and 22 Jump Streets, I know you're not as crazy about those movies as I am, but I do think he is very good at comedy in the sense of just being the dumb meathead who just very dry. Not droll's not the proper word, but you know, just one of those guys. Not much is going on upstairs. And with this, he's got the gun at him, and he keeps like trying to invite him in. And he says he Googled it, and he's like, "If you're in my house, I can shoot you." So he's trying to get him in. So you got the comedy of that, and then their whole situation. He's going to buy the camera back from him. He's like, "And I'll give you $1,000 for your trouble."
It's a rematch, but it's an intellectual rematch.
I was going to say, instead of a game of fists, it's a game of wits.
Yep.
And the issue, though, is Nick had been watching and following Ronnie because he had been suspicious about his behavior and his general temperament, and he finds him and just sees him giving Zip this wad of cash, and naturally he thinks that he's relapsed and that he's gambling again, or if there's, you know, an issue at hand, because he also sees him get handed a brown paper sack, which universally is probably not it's never a good look. No. So after a day of roaming and kind of weighing on things and mulling them over mentally, Ronnie returns home to see an intervention has been set up for him. His sister and brother-in-law are there, his co-worker, of course, Nick and Geneva, and Beth is at the helm of all this. And shockingly, a twist here, Channing Tatum wanders in, Zip, and Geneva freaks out more than anybody. And but Nick explains, you know, I read in this pamphlet, it says, you know, your suppliers should come to these things. And it's all a massive, you know, mix up. They think that Zip is his bookie and that he's making bets. And of course, Channing Tatum doesn't help this at all by just going along with it and saying, you know, you make bets on everything. One of my belly laughs of the movie was, again, I don't expect you to really understand the comedy behind this, Julio, but in 2011, it was especially funny. He's like, you bet on sports all the time. The Bulls, the Sox, the Cubs. And he just says it with this utter condescension in his tone that was fucking hilarious.
He's good enough that I understood the intent, even if I didn't know why it was supposed to be funny.
There you go. I mean, at that point in time, it was still kind of a joke to be a Cubs fan. It would be another 5 years before they won the World Series. But yeah, I guess that's true. Like the delivery of it all in the context, you could tell that it was supposed to make him look like a fucking moron.
This is pretty crazy because it's obviously this is basically the climax of the movie. I mean, there's a little bit more to come, but this is the big moment, and it's just so awkward, so cringe worthy, also funny because it opens with when he's being welcomed. Vince Vaughn is being welcomed by everybody there. His sister is there, and earlier in the movie when he was trying to get advice from people, he called his sister, throw her in hypothetical that she understood as Vince Vaughn telling her that her husband was cheating on her. And then it turns out later in the party, we find out that she confronted her husband about it, and the husband admitted it. And so here, the husband just hugs Vince Vaughn, and he's like, I don't know how you found out, but if you ever fuck me like that again, I'll kill you. That's the perfect, it's just like the perfect joke in 3 stages. Every development of it was funny. And of course, just when you get to the end here, it's great.
So Ronnie's had enough. Basically, it's an intervention because they all think he's gambling again. And Zip's not going along with it. Geneva just yells at him at one point. Winona Ryder's just like, what the hell are you doing here? And everyone's kind of like, what the hell? No one really pays it too much mind, but it's definitely out of left field. So then Ronnie's like, fuck it, I'm not doing this. You got to look at these pictures. So he takes out his camera to show him. And of course, Zip had erased them all and just replaced them with one picture of him giving him the bird in front of his crushed fish tank. So at this point, Vince Vaughn just decks Channing Tatum in the face. And this is the last we see of Zip. He scurries away. And on the way out, he's like, no, I would like to get high with you sometime, but man, you're crazy.
He had stolen enough of the movie. It was time for him to go.
Yeah. He was just an ancillary, a happenstantial character, but definitely stuck out as a positive. So at this point, Ronnie's had enough, and he just comes completely clean with everything that's going on. Just says, I found Geneva messing around with that dude, and this was weighing on me. I haven't known how to tell you. I've been following her around. And then Winona, Geneva, she gives him the death glare and then gets all worked up, and you think that she's gonna just unload, the soliloquy she had earlier in the movie, her desperate cries for help and blame. And she actually owns up to it. She just is like, fuck it. And she's an adult about it and is like, yes, I've been doing it. What do you expect from me? And we have this three-way conversation going on. This is the best picture clip. I guess you would probably play this during because best pictures typically over the past few years have been like
a montage of,
montage is the word I'm looking for, like clips tied together. This would be the best screenplay part, where they show like the words from the script and the actors are acting them out, because you get like crushed Kevin James crying and screaming Winona Ryder, calm but still just emotionally spent Vince Vaughn, and then you have Jennifer Connelly, who's just aghast. Probably a better word is just fraught and overcome with emotion at this point. It's going into this movie with what little I knew about it. I just knew it was a movie with a trailer that, you know, was like, Vince Vaughn and Kevin James are zany, rated PG-13. I did not expect a scene like this. It was powerful.
But it's also, I think that part of what helps it work so well is that they all react in ways that are not movie-like. Because you're used to a movie extending the conflict. So you're used to Kevin James not believing whenever they tell him. You're used to Winona Ryder lying about it when confronted about it. And you're used to Jennifer Connelly being jealous and not understanding of the situation that Vince Vaughn was in. But that's not at all what happens. It's the complete opposite. When Vince Vaughn tells Kevin James about it, because they're friends, he actually takes him seriously. I thought that it would have been so easy for them to just extend the movie another 20, 30 minutes if you just had Kevin James automatically assume that Vince Vaughn was just trying to get out of the intervention by distracting him with this shit. And then the fact that Winona Ryder cops to it also, you know, she's like, you could have gone much longer if she decided to fight them. And again, you could also have a subplot of Jennifer Connelly just breaking up with him temporarily because she just can't handle the shit. But no.
All the things you were saying are like exactly what I expected to happen watching this.
Yep.
Like, I expected the intervention leader, I know there's a term for that, I apologize, but I expected him to get like a pie in the face, and like Twisted Sisters, We're Not Gonna Take It was gonna start playing. So like watching this all play out, I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it's good, and I would say that I mean, obviously this would be too long to play it at the Oscars, but to me it starts with Kevin James having this really heartfelt speech before Vince Vaughn says anything. Kevin James is like, no, just let me talk, and he tells him about how from the moment that he saw him, he wanted to be his friend because he was so cool. And so before anything about the infidelity comes out, these two have just like a bro to bro moment where they just tell each other how much they care, you know, and then things get ugly. But that's just acting that you don't usually see from most of them. So it's pretty cool.
Ron Howard called them all in and he said, guys, we're going to wow them with this one.
They rehearsed that one for 2 weeks before shooting.
Yeah, they rehearsed it, and much like Bram Stoker's Dracula, or you know, the evergreen reference of Blue is the Warmest Color, I can just see Ron Howard off screen just yelling, "You're a whore! You're a whore!"
He put like those shock bracelets on Kevin James and Vince Vaughn whenever they tried to riff or try to be funny. He was like, "No, this is not the time." He just shocked them.
Yeah, that was like the rehearsal that took 2 weeks. They would try to riff. He was like, "No, god damn it, again, from one." So Ronnie goes out for a long stroll. Obviously, it has been a taxing week for him. He returns back to the apartment, and just like you were saying, you expect certain things to come from movies, especially movies like this. So when he returns for the evening and he got dinner, burgers or some shit, and Beth comes out and they talk about what's happened, you expect this to be something like, "I love you more than there's water in the ocean," or "If you're a bird, I'm a bird," or all that bullshit. Like, it's like an adult conversation where Beth is like, she's like, "I don't trust you, and that's not healthy." She's like, "We need to work at these things." And it's so weird. It's like, this is a movie with Kevin James, and it's like these real, like, well-acted scenes of adult conversation. And I could definitely see, if you were going into this thinking it was going to be Paul Blart or something like that, being kind of thrown a loop. But
earlier when you asked if I thought that this was a good family movie or a good date movie, this is where I think that some people going on a date to watch this movie this sort of honest conversation, while healthy and beneficial to a relationship, it's not the kind of thing that you're looking for on a date movie that's just when you're just getting to know each other. And I think it would just make them uncomfortable because they would want the "I'm a bird, you're a bird" moment instead of this. It's not a clear cut happy ending. It's just him saying, "You're right. I'm gonna have to earn your trust again."
And he like tells her, he's like, "I walked past the casino 3 times. Like I was really tempted, but I didn't go in." Yeah, it's very strange tonally for the movie, but very well acted. And then, of course, at that point, it would feel like horse shit if he did some like super romantic proposal. So when she opens up her to-go of food, like the ring's in there, and she's just like, "Yes, of course." So we go to the next day at the proposal, the demonstration of their electric car. You know, all the chips are on the table, all those other euphemisms and analogies and figures of speech you can think of. And beforehand, they meet each other in the waiting room. They try to talk. We learn that Geneva had moved out, so we have seen our last of Miss Winona Ryder in this movie. And Ronnie tries to apologize to Nick, and then we get the old Liam and Noel Gallagher special where they get into a fight before their show.
Boys will be boys.
Boys will be boys. Yeah, it's not much of a fight. Old Paul Blart pops him one in the face, and Vince Vaughn gets up, and it's kind of like Saving Silverman, or there's a lot of movies like that, but just so, okay, I deserve that, and if you feel the need to hit me again, go for it. And he knees him. I don't know if he kneed him in the groin or the bread basket, but drops him like the proverbial sack of potatoes. And the representatives come in, they're like, "We're ready for you." And one of the guys walks over to Ronnie, and he's like, "After what we've just seen in there," and then just classic Vince Vaughn delivery. He's like, "Oh, we're just kids cooped up in a car too long. We're just working." Then he winks at him, and man, Vince Vaughn, it's fitting that he is and Fighting with My Family, because God, when I listen to him talk, he would have been a millionaire in the pro wrestling business, just his ability to bullshit.
He's right. Sometimes you just have to punch things out.
Yeah.
Words can only take you so far.
And I mean, men are stupid creatures that don't really know how to resolve issues sometimes without just bashing shit into one another. Look at the game of football. And the demonstration goes off without a hitch. It goes swimmingly. We get some awesome Kevin James facial expressions as he's revving the engine, and that everything goes perfect, and they cut him a big fat check, and it's a done deal. So they succeed.
Yeah, it might have been like the remnants of Bram Stoker Dracula in my head, but I was just thinking cargasm the entire time that Kevin James is there, just revving it up and just looking like he's climaxing while everybody else watches. Coppola directed the second unit.
So we transition from, life is good to yet another Blackhawks game. I guess they have season tickets. And previously in the movie at the Blackhawks game, Kevin James, Nick explained, if he ever had that opportunity to make that half-rank shot into the little gimmick slot for the net, or the goal, excuse me, he'd be able to do so. And with this, he is able to do so with Vince Vaughn giving him the speech from Miracle with Kurt Russell, and he makes it. The end.
Freeze frame. This is a little bit of just cultural gap, I guess, on my part, because what do you do? How do you get picked to take that shot? Because to me, it felt very convenient. I understand it's a movie, and we need the happy ending, but that right now when he needs a win, or just like the cherry on top of the win that was getting the car job, he finally gets picked, because he made it sound like he'd been waiting his whole life to do this.
So,
and then at the end of the movie, do they pick you at random, or do you sign up and hope that they pick your name?
I know there have been times you can sign up. Sometimes it's like contests, like, if you find a sticker on your soda, or, your can or a bag of chips that says that, or like, especially from a local perspective, it's a lot of like radio shows, like, hey, if you're the 10th caller, you'll get the opportunity to do this. There's basically ways to win it. So
if your wife just left you,
yeah,
for Channing Tatum.
I mean, we were already pushing 2 hours. I didn't want to add another 5 minutes on of Kevin James calling KLBB or WXN.
The movie had given us enough that I had no problem justifying it to myself by just assuming that Vince Vaughn had a hand in it. Somehow he just, he's fast-talking Vince Vaughn. He talked to someone, gave him the story, and said, "Can you just do this for this guy? He needs it."
That's believable. I buy that. Or Queen Latifah just hooked him up with it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
She, What did it say? She keeps calling me bro. Is it bro that she calls him, or
I think so. Yeah, that's Kevin James saying.
yeah?
All right. So the dilemma was quelled. That concludes Contrarians Corner. Julio, you ready to move on to real talk of this Ron Howard masterpiece?
Yes. Let's move on to real talk.
See, you need to understand how this is gonna play out, Ronnie. I'm gonna tell him how we slept together all those years ago, and then I'm gonna say that you started making passes at me, and that they never stopped.
You do that. You sell him that I've been hitting on you for 20 years straight.
I should have told you, Nick. I should have told you sooner. But Ronnie insisted that we not say anything. But as the years went on, it got harder and harder, and I just lied to myself and said it didn't matter, but I'm telling you this now because Ronnie has gone crazy. He's been throwing me up against restaurant walls, like right when you're right around the corner. It's like he wants you to see, he wants to get caught because he feels so guilty. But I don't feel safe anymore, Nick.
Okay.
And this had to come out. Then what are you gonna do, Ronnie? Mr. Moral Guy. Are you gonna look your best friend in the eyes and lie to him and say, no, that never happened, I never slept with her? I don't think so. Stay out of my marriage.
All right. I am recording for real talk.
Excellent. Real talk for the dilemma. What a fascinating movie.
How many Ron Howard movies would you say you've watched?
Oh, it's got to be in the millions.
Directed
Jesus.
by only.
Let me pull up his filmography here.
So I want to say that I've watched all the heavy hitters in his filmography except for Splash.
Saw Splash when I was a kid. Wow, I was off with Night Shift. I said 84 or 85. That was 82. First movie he directed was Grand Theft Auto in 1977 that starred himself and Nancy Morgan. But Night Shift, I know you haven't seen Night Shift, correct?
Right. I guess that's my other big blind spot.
Night Shift rules. I've never seen Willow. Parenthood, yeah. Backdraft. Apollo 13, of course. I didn't know he directed Ed TV. Fascinating.
Yeah.
The Grinch. What are your thoughts on the live action Grinch?
I've only seen it once. At the time it was a Jim Carrey movie, so I enjoyed it as that. I've never felt the need to watch it again. If I were to watch a Christmas movie, I think there are Christmas movies that I enjoy more.
I agree with that. I also don't think, for some reason, I remember it getting, or it has a legacy of a lot of people shit on it, which I don't agree with entirely.
Well, I've never seen that the I guess the one that's considered a classic, the cartoon version of it. So I think that might have been part of it. I think some people would just complain about that, about the fact that it's not like the cartoon, and it's very clearly a Jim Carrey vehicle. But that's, well, what did you expect?
I never saw Solo, a Star Wars story, but he was like one of several directors on that, right?
They fired the guys behind the Lego Movie and now Spider-Verse, and they brought him in to just kind of put it all together,
put a bow on it.
Yeah, he gets the directorial credit, so I think it's still, most of it is his. It's definitely a Ron Howard movie. It's not a movie by those guys.
Gotcha.
And it's, I mean, I like it. It's good. It's probably, about as good as Rogue One.
I remember thinking Da Vinci Code was fine for what it is. It's not. I don't really have any interest in watching it again, but I remember thinking it was fine. To answer your question, I have seen a good amount, and also I am familiar with Sir Ron Howard's filmography. So,
do you feel, based on your Ron Howard experience, do you feel that this is an outlier?
Yeah, it doesn't really feel like a Ron Howard movie. What feels like a Ron Howard movie about this is that it has such an A-list cast that I could see did it to work with Ron Howard.
Right.
Maybe not specifically Kevin James and Vince Vaughn, but I think Jennifer Connelly and Winona Ryder are interesting choices that I couldn't say you would have the same enthusiasm from them had it been a lesser director. So let's just get to the nuts and bolts, the meat and potatoes here. To reiterate, it was released on January 14th, 2011, a budget of $70 million, but despite its loaded cast and A-list director, barely recouped that. Made just a little bit over $69 million at the box office. Made over $6 million from DVD sales, though, which, again, this is only 9 years ago, and that still seems like unfathomable by today's standards.
Well, you can't pause and rewind on that kiss between Channing Tatum and Winona Ryder in movie theaters, but you can when you own the DVD.
Yeah. And all you people that have laughed at me for my physical media collection, everything's getting taken down, man. I'm going to be the only game in town. When they get Tropic Thunder, I got the director's cut Blu-ray. So you can come rent it from me. So
they'll just have an introduction from Ben Stiller and Robert Downey Jr. explaining the
that one. Complete quick sidebar. That particular, when people make a fuss about that, like, there's a 100% chance they have not watched the movie.
Yep.
There's a lot of other things that, like, I will yield my time, or I will step away and say, you are right. That one is not one of them. You have not watched the movie. Here nor there. What is here is the dilemma, and I believe we said 24% a bit earlier. Yes, on Rotten Tomatoes. So, Julio, let's breeze through this here. Let's get your quotes, and then I got a few trivia bits, because I definitely want to get into a discussion about this movie.
Yes, yeah. I think that it will be interesting. So, fresh quotes. Some people actually like it. Some critics actually like this movie. Lindy West from The Stranger, Seattle, Washington, says, to its credit, the dilemma treats the complicated tensions and sadnesses and joys of relationships with far more nuance than most modern comedies. It's almost like she was listening to our last 10, 20 minutes of Contrarians Corner. David Denby from The New Yorker says, whoever thought that Ron Howard could make a cult film? This movie is a mess, but it's an intelligent and affecting mess. I kind of want to say that he's had some cult films in his career. I mean,
fucking Night Shift is a cult movie.
My first thought was Willow. I mean, Willow, everybody loves Willow,
yeah.
but Willow is not, this classic. It's a cult classic.
Can you reread the last line of that review? He said it's a mess, but what?
But it's an intelligent and affecting mess.
That seems to be pretty close to where I'm going to side.
Yeah. Eric Childress from eFilmCritic.com says, a surprisingly honest take on relationships with terrific performances by the four leads. A shame it has been misadvertised as a wacky comedy, because it is much better than that.
Yep.
Betsy Sharkey from Los Angeles Times says, what the dilemma ultimately does best is create a platform for Vaughn to drag that iconic character of his into full-blown adulthood. There wasn't really a quote that mentioned Winona Ryder, but I did some more digging, and I pulled up a review that was titled Winona Ryder Shines in the Dilemma, and then I picked a quote from it that says, it's from Roger Moore from the Orlando Sentinel. And he says, Ryder, giving her unfaithful wife more of an edge than the namby-pamby script calls for, reminds us in a single funny, poignant scene what she's capable of as an actress. She's so good, she left Howard with a real dilemma. How not to make this movie totally about her, and how not to see everything from her point of view. I think he's going a little too far, but I don't disagree.
No. Obviously, we tiptoed around it, but did bring it up because it was kind of a controversial part of this movie, that Vince Vaughn's kind of reckless use of the word gay in the opening of the movie, the first act. The film's trailer caused an almighty fuss because of one line where Vince Vaughn's character says, electric cars are gay. I mean, not homosexual gay, but my parents are chaperoning the dance gay. Universal contacted the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, GLAAD, to see how they felt about it. Not surprisingly, GLAAD were not keen on it. Sure enough, the trailer attracted a lot of criticism for this one line when it was released, eventually being publicly criticized by Anderson Cooper.
Universal were forced to release a new trailer without the offending line. Co-producer and director Ron Howard, however, refused to cut the line from the film itself as he felt it was tantamount to censorship.
Such a weird...
It's an odd hill to die on.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. I completely understand where GLAAD is coming from. You know, it's like, if I'm honest, like, I find the line funny, but that's because the line is not making fun of me. So... if Vince Vaughn was saying, if he was saying this car is so Julio, you know, and I don't mean Julio Rivera, but I mean Julio that works at Cinemark Julio, or Julio that has a podcast Julio, you know, I don't know. I think that I know it's a pretty clunky comparison, but you know, even though it's not, I think, directly homophobic, I think that it's using the word gay, which by now it's like gay is 100% associated with homosexual people. So it's using it in a way that's kind of, you call it pejorative, you know? You're equating it to something
pejorative.
That's bad. So especially when you consider what it amounts to in the movie, it's like, just take it out, you know, or have a conversation about it. I don't know.
It's, again, it's, I don't really think the entire movie would have been altered too greatly if that had been taken out. So it is kind of an odd hill to die on. It's certainly not like repulsively offensive at the same time. It just kind of seems like, yeah, you probably don't need to do that. And this was 10 years ago. God, by today's, whatever you want to call it, cancel culture, what have you, that it have Vince Vaughn's head on a pike out on Rodeo Drive.
But also you would have Todd Phillips coming out of his support.
Oh yeah, it'd be a fucking mess.
It'd be like, this is why we can't be funny anymore.
It'd be like Ron Howard would be leaving, you know, lunch somewhere in LA, and it'd be like you know, the wokes would find him, and it would be tantamount, to steal that word right there, to Tommy Lee Jones when he turns around and sees all the prisoners coming at him and natural born killers. Ah! Like Julio said, I laughed at it. I think I laughed at it more from like a what? Because if I had known about the whole fuss at the time, I had forgotten about it by the time I watched the movie. So my laughter was more just kind of nervous, like, huh?
Where is this going?
Yeah. During shooting in the United Center for the shoot the puck scene, Kevin James actually made it into the net while practicing for the scene. The extras in the United Center erupted into Chelsea Dagger to commemorate his accomplishment. Chelsea Dagger is the song that plays when the Blackhawks score. In the movie, it's the da 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 da. I would assume footage of that exists somewhere. I would hope so, of him actually making it, because that's
Kevin James hopes so too.
Yes. He's been bugging Universal ever since. Winona Ryder won the lead female role after 2 auditions, beating out the likes of Kate Beckinsale, Carla Gugino, and Uma Thurman, which just like the idea that Uma Thurman and Winona Ryder were competing for this role. Again, I think it just goes to working with Ron Howard. I think that has to be a big part of it.
I thought you were going to say the idea that any of those women, Winona Ryder included, would just have to make us believe that they were married to Kevin James. I kid. I mean,
Fair.
Kevin James, he's a funny guy. He has personality. He's not classically attractive in the way that, you know, Channing Tatum is. But I also, now that we're in real talk, yeah, of course I buy them as a couple. I mean,
yeah, it's part of a greater bit, as we've talked about when we talk about Kevin James. In King of Queens, he had Leah Remini, who's a fucking smoke show, and Here Comes the Boom, you know, Salma Hayek, one of the hottest women ever. It's just, I think after a while it almost becomes funnier because all these hot women are with him. It's Will Ferrell and the other guys. Like, that's that whole joke in that movie. Jennifer Garner was cast but dropped out and was replaced by Jennifer Connelly, which I can definitely see Jennifer Garner in that role. But that being said, I thought Jennifer Connelly was like perfect for that. She's, I don't know if underutilized is the right word. It just seems like she's a very well-known talent, but I would like to see her more. It could also be completely choice of hers. She just does what she wants to, which I think is probably the case because I don't know why the fuck she would have done The Day the Earth Stood Still.
I forgot that she was in that movie. I I don't think I've seen enough movies of hers to really make an assessment of how this feels compared to, I guess, standard Jennifer Connelly. I know that it surprised me how laid back she was. When I think Jennifer Connelly, for some reason, I just think she's like the center of the moral center, and she kind of is in this movie. But she's also pretty laid back. She's having a lot of fun with Vince Vaughn. She's making jokes. She's being playful, and I usually think of her as being more straight laced. Wasn't A Beautiful Mind directed by Ron Howard too? And she plays Russell Crowe's wife in that one. So yeah, I don't know. It might be that I think she's in that romantic comedy. Is it
Requiem
He's Not
for a
That
Dream?
Into You? Yes.
That romantic comedy about her and Keith David.
Yes.
Jesus.
Anyway,
yeah,
she,
he's
I
just
don't
not that
think I've
into
ever
you.
seen her, be as playful as in this movie.
Have you ever seen He's Just Not That Into You?
Yeah.
Her and B. Coop's story arc is easily the most fascinating part of that movie.
Okay, so because I don't remember what her part was. So she is his wife, and he is cheating on her with Scarlett Johansson, right?
Yeah, and then she tries to God, it's so you have to watch it through your fingers type thing. When she shows up at his office and he makes Scarlett Johansson hide in the closet, and she has to watch them have sex.
Yep.
It's awful. Awful.
Such a hard life.
Fuck you, B. Coop. Yeah, I know, right? Kevin James was originally cast for that role, but he had to drop out. So that the trivia is pretty light on this movie. I mean, it's not we're not talking about fucking a Christopher Nolan movie here, or some massive event movie, or The Artist, or any one of these movies that we continuously name drop as events or gimmicks or big things that happen in the film industry. Star Wars, this was not. So that being said, its legacy is fairly minimal. So much so that I watched this movie 10 years later, having only seen the trailer 10 years ago, and thought I knew what it was. And one of those reviews you read hit the nail on the head with horribly misadvertised, because I was watching this expecting fucking Happy Madison type shit.
Yep.
And so when this movie ended, I was my thoughts, I was kind of thinking out loud to myself about it when the credits were rolling. So it's not good. It's not a good movie because it's kind of all over the place tonally. But that one about it's a mess, but it's an intelligent mess. There's something to this that's good. And that I'm not even saying you have to get a different cast to make what's here great, because I think the cast in their respective roles are excellent in this movie. The problem is it's not a comedy, and it tries hard to be. What it could be is a drama, or more of a melancholy type movie, but has a couple jokes in it. I mean, there's plenty of dramas that we could name that have some funny parts to it, and there are fucking. I lost my shit with the part where he's in the massage parlor, and she comes up, she's like, "Oh, we have good massage for you. This is going to be great. You're going to be so happy." And Vince Vaughn's on the phone, and he's like, "What's that?" And Kevin James goes, "Oh, there's a war movie on before the Mad Men marathon." I laughed so hard, to the point where I had to pause it because I didn't want to miss what was coming up. That, and I mentioned in Contrarians Corner, the jesting about the Cubs I thought was really funny. And the thing talking about, I met this Hasidic guy at Gamblers Anonymous. He's going to sell me this ring. Little things like that aren't drawing attention to themselves, trying to be funny. Where this movie derails are these segments where things try to draw attention to themselves because they're funny. The not Kevin James, the Channing Tatum, the tattoo on his ass, and that type of stuff. It's just kind of those things occur and then derail the momentum of the movie. I think the best example of that is, you said you thought it was funny, so I might be in disagreement here. I thought the whole toast scene was just bad, and
I think that by then, because I agree with you, if you could tone down the comedy while still keeping it funny, this would be a much better movie. But the difference is that the speech, at least I found it funny. It's just so inappropriate what he's saying, and the whole idea. I am a sucker for Vince Vaughn riffing. You know how I feel usually about riffing, but Vince Vaughn is usually pretty funny, and he's riffing.
He's gifted.
Here. Yeah. He's just, he just keeps going on and on about the pool and the guy that cleans the pool and the fact that they're both really attractive people. It just cracked me up. But
He's saying about the dad too, something about like he worked in clothing. You think he didn't look at a few women in his day?
yeah. Yeah, in the delivery, but something that doesn't work is all the shit with at the Guardians with Vince Vaughn falling on the plants that are poisonous, and now he has the rash, and it's just
that's shit that just was there for the trailers and TV spots.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say I think I kind of figured it out right now. Probably the reason I was checked out of the toast scene because the fight scene with Channing Tatum goes on way too long. I think I was annoyed probably by that point, but
I mean, I wasn't getting in Contrarians Corner. I like that there's a lot of back and forth in that fight. I mean, I don't think it needs to be, but it also, at least there's something to it. I like that, first you think it's going to be as simple as Channing Tatum caught him, so he's going to kick his ass. Yeah. But then Vince Vaughn actually has a pretty brutal rebound with the flamethrower, and then you think he's won. And the fact that Channing Tatum gets the upper hand again, but only until Vince Vaughn reveals why he's there, and the fact that Channing Tatum is ashamed and kind of hurt by what Vince Vaughn has said, all that stuff. It's good, but I kind of wish that maybe it was condensed a little more.
Yeah, it's like out of everything in the movie, I think like that seemed to lack the most direction. It's a movie that we'll never get. We'll never get the Criterion essay about it, but I would be curious to see like what the Alan Loeb and Ron Howard, what they're envisioning, how that aligned with what the studio wanted, because you're gonna have a hard time trying to sell Vince Vaughn Kevin James movie as like that has a serious twinge to it.
You're right, actually. Yeah, now that because with that in mind, maybe you do need a recast just for the purpose of easing the audience into the kind of movie that this is. I can buy Winona Ryder and Jennifer Connelly in the movie that we really want it to be, but when you have Vince Vaughn and Kevin James at the helm, then it's hard not to go in with the expectation that this is going to be,
it's
Wedding Crashers or
yeah, exactly, or Paul Blart, and yeah, just kind of revisiting the trailer. It's wacky, and it makes Channing Tatum look like a borderline invalid that's just kind of like this piece of meat, and which I guess he is, but he does have some really funny parts in the movie. And then it's naturally, especially the time period, the natural thing to compare it to is Love and Other Drugs in terms of the trailer not exactly meshing up with what you got. Of course, Love and Other Drugs kind of took that they turned that up to 11. I think what you got was not even in the same galaxy as what was advertised. So
okay. So you have Mark Ruffalo in the Kevin James role, and you have Jake Gyllenhaal is too young to be with Mark Ruffalo contemporary. Maybe I always go with Fassbender because I think Fassbender could do no wrong.
Let's do John Hamm in the Vince Vaughn role.
Oh, that's really good.
I mean you can keep Jennifer Connelly and Winona Ryder
because they work. They when you see them in a movie, you don't automatically think wacky comedy, so you can just go in with whatever they do.
And then because the way Channing Tatum's portrayed is silly, I'd replace him with like Idris Elba and make him like a businessman, like an emotionally immature, but not like an idiot.
Right. He's a
cunning
and
smart.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
There you go. Hop on it, Hollywood. And Ron Howard can direct it. This holiday season. Yeah, it's of all the movies we do, it's the movies like this that kind of, they don't stick in my craw because that is a negative connotation, but it's kind of like they just kind of hang around in the back of my head because a lot of movies we've done, even at this point in the recording process, it's already come in and gone. With this, like, I guess it's the surprise factor because I was being genuine in a lot of Contrarians Corner. Some of the scenes in this are like I am going to have to rewatch this movie because like things will be happening. And then I'll think to myself, wait, is this really good? And then I might go, oh my God, this is actually really good. And it's like, so what did I miss before when I was just expecting to be silly? Dude, that scene where Winona Ryder like walks through everything that's going to happen if you tell him is awesome. It's like, it's so bitchy and vindictive, but also like perfectly played because she comes across as just kind of almost evil. But then it works because then at the end of the movie, she just like realizes this is stupid. I just need to be an adult about this. Which again, it's a fucking Kevin James and Vince Vaughn comedy movie. Like I shouldn't be having like these ideas and emotions about these characters and like because perfect example, I love Here Comes the Boom, but I can admit that is every Kevin James trope rolled into an MMA movie, so that's why I enjoy it. With this, I know. Did you see that new movie that Kevin James came out with where he's a Nazi?
What?
Oh, okay. So I was about to say this is probably the deepest Kevin James role, but I haven't seen. It's called Becky, I think is what it's called. When we finish, you're gonna have to look up the trailer. Like Kevin James is bald with a big beard and has like a swastika on the back of his head, and it was like a made for streaming service movie. But anyway, I'm not gonna watch that. I will watch The Dilemma again. I think he is the weakest in the movie, but I think that's because obviously you've got two titans and Jennifer Connelly and Winona Ryder, and then for as much as we talk about Vince Vaughn, being just a riffer, and obviously his movies are Vince Vaughn movies, he's still a talented guy. Like we talked about in our real talk of our Fred Claus episode, that whole I have an act thing. That I think that's a lot of times where clearly people lose sight of, people like Adam Sandler and Tyler Perry, and people that have like this shtick. You still have to have some talent to carry that successfully for multiple movies over and over again. And then especially someone like Vince Vaughn. I mean, Adam Sandler, we've had it with Uncut Gems and things like that. But like Vince Vaughn has moments in movies like this, like Fred Claus, maybe Wedding Crashers. I haven't seen that in a while, but he has these moments of like transparency where you're like, okay, this guy knows exactly what he's doing. It's not just kind of like dumb luck that it's not Andrew Dice Clay or something like that, where it's just this shtick that worked one time only. It's his interactions, that scene with Jennifer Connelly at the end. It's like, I believe everything that's happening. And it's very strange. Like I'm like haunted by this. We're going into this like with what I expected to come from it. So I guess my question to you, since we record these remotely now, we kind of keep quiet with each other about things going into the movie. Had you seen this before?
Yeah, I saw it when it first came out. I might have even screened it. And my wife asked me how it was when I finished it tonight. And I said it wasn't good, but it was better than I remembered. And that's, a pretty good way of summing it up, because I remember feeling like maybe it has to do with age, I don't know. I remember feeling like all the serious stuff didn't work when I watched it the first time. And now, of course, watching it today, that's the only thing that works. All the stuff at the intervention when I, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, I was just like, can you just move on? It's too much. It reminded me of because there's so much coming together at that moment. It reminded me of Crazy Stupid Love when everybody comes together.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But no, it's actually better because you have really strong performances. I think that's really what saves it. It
didn't devolve into a Three Stooges act like the fucking Crazy Stupid Love did.
Nope, it could have, but they were wise enough to get Channing Tatum out of there quickly enough, and then really spend the rest of the scene with honest emotion. But I think my main problem now, and it was there to actually, this is what I remember the most about the first time I watched it. Even from watching the trailer, I didn't think that there was enough there for a movie. And I'm still not sure that there was. That quote I read in Contrarians Corner about the guy that said that an episode of Friends would have handled this better. They would have taken care of it. It's true, because, or at least that's how I feel. To me, the idea that, Vince Vaughn saw Winona Ryder kiss Channing Tatum, and now he doesn't know if he's going to tell Kevin James or not, that's a 30-minute sitcom. I can see how they pad it with other stuff going on so that it's an almost 2-hour-long movie, but most of that padding feels like padding. To me, by the time we get to the end, I can't believe that Vince Vaughn didn't just say something earlier. There's many opportunities where he could have told Kevin James, or he could have told Jennifer Connelly, and he doesn't. And the movie explains why, but it feels like an explanation of like, it basically amounts to, because this needs to keep going.
The movie does a good job of at least as trivial and like, I guess almost silly as some of them may be, it does a really good job of, plugging every hole. So like, at least you're told why he didn't tell these people. But like you said,
but I
even
can
then,
see,
it's
I can still
flimsy.
see the hole.
Yeah,
it's plugged, but I can still see the circle around
it's
it.
a piece of duct tape over it.
Yes,
like
exactly.
one layer of duct tape. Yeah, so it's. I appreciate him for at least realizing the holes are there, and I mean, you have a experienced filmmaker in Ron Howard in it, but yeah. All the answers are really flimsy and basically boil down to because it's a movie.
Yeah. And especially because I don't think they ever give us a true reason why he wouldn't tell Jennifer Connelly. I can understand why he wouldn't tell Kevin James because he has the project that he's working on. He's already like fucked up, and they need him to get that project done. And Winona Ryder gives a good reason why he can't confront her directly because she has something on him. But which, by the way, that's another thing that. It's like, all right, I'll buy it, but it's pretty contrived. The fact that it turns out that way back in the day they had sex, it just feels like such a piece of duct tape.
Yeah,
we need her to have something on him so that she'll have more credibility than he does. But yeah, why wouldn't he tell Jennifer Connelly, who is nothing but 100% understanding and sensible in the movie? If he tells Jennifer Connelly, he's no longer alone, and then the rest of the movie doesn't happen, or it just ends so much faster. So that's to me one of the big issues that I can feel that they're stretching it.
Yeah.
But I like a lot of it. I like it a lot more now. Like I said, all the emotional stuff I really liked. This should say something that when the movie was over, I spent a good chunk of time talking to my wife about whether she had a couple, like friends who were a couple, where she wouldn't automatically go to the closest friend to tell them, hey, your significant other is cheating on you. You know what I mean? Like the idea that I think that most of us, we have friends that are couples, but in that couple, there's always one friend that's the primary friend. And if that primary friend gets cheated on, you have absolutely no problem going to that friend and saying it directly. You don't have, it may suck, but you're not going to dilly-dally the way that Vince Vaughn does in this movie. The one thing that does convincingly is I buy that he cares for both Winona Ryder and Kevin James.
Yeah.
That part I'm on board with. And the fact that he goes up to her and gives her a chance to be the one that tells him, all that stuff, is believable. But
I wasn't kidding in the first portion. That scene, like, for how fast it comes, it really surprised me. Like, I thought there was just going to be like a series. Again, until like halfway through the movie, I kept thinking, Kevin James was going to slip on a pie or something in the next scene. But so the fact, like, I thought there was going to be like he was going to go and like, Geneva, and then get beer spilled on him. So like the fact that they just have it out right there in like that public setting. I mean, again, the whole thing of this movie, like I said, like we've been talking about, it's this flimsy like model of a movie that's almost falling over, but like the base or what have you, the foundation is really strong. And her whole thing of like, you don't know shit about what it's like to be married, and it's not played for laughs at all. And again, we can't understate enough that this movie, because of its flimsiness, it pretty much all rests on little nuggets of the writing, but also the acting, in that like everyone in this movie seems to have been there to work, and they didn't just show up and to cash a paycheck or catch a paycheck type of thing. It's they're all giving it. I mean, Winona's parts are great. Jennifer Connelly doesn't have overly too many lines, but you can tell she's like committed to it. Kevin James is giving it his all. Like I said, it's like a model that you're just missing like one really imperative part to it, and like
the
everything
moment you
else
stop
around.
holding it, it's gonna fall apart.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's almost there, but it's not.
Yeah,
it's which sucks, but at least like it has a lot of good we can point to, which is
the bad version of that Winona Vince Vaughn confrontation is a whole set piece where he's just trying to look into her phone to see if she's been texting Channing Tatum, and it's just 5-7 minutes of that, and they never really arrived at any meaningful exchange of words. but it's just him being funny and getting his beer, trying to look over her shoulder, and
he like grabs her phone and then he's like chasing around trying to get the facial recognition to match up.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of scenes in this movie that I was like, I could see like a very cringe-worthy or cringe-inducing version of this. So I'm just baffled by it. I'm going to have to fucking watch this movie again. Just mismanaged. And, you know, like you said, the 30-minute show, I think at best even you could do like, you know, a two-parter. Just kind of drag it out. But no, for the story they have here, even though they try to introduce a bunch of really interesting aspects to it, this is not enough for a 2-hour movie, and because of that, you get some really dragging sequences throughout it.
Yeah. How'd you feel about Queen Latifah now that we're in real talk?
This was, you know, during that period where she was just, she was Queen Latifah and everything. This would have been around the time of What Happens in Vegas, which is also a very good movie. That's complete like dog shit trailer, but I remember just loving it. It's stupid. It's really stupid, but God, it's fucking hilarious. Where she has a similar role to this. She's just kind of...
She's the Stifler?
She's the... Well, not the Stifler. She's a bit turned up in this, but in a sense, she's still kind of the conscience of the movie of like, she keeps everything on track, kind of unloads this exposition throughout it. And she did a lot of white people movies where she was like, you know, Queen Latifah and Queen Latifah. That's how you can put it over the top for it. So... she's fine. The dialogue she has in lesser hands could you want to talk about could be cringeworthy.
Yep.
Yeah. Like, but I think she's funny with it, the way she delivers it. But he had like fucking Jennifer Tilly trying to say that shit. Oof.
I think but she is such a standout element of that side of this movie's personality, where she is pretty much just the full-on comedy, kind of juvenile, sex-driven gags. Her character does not belong in the more toned-down version of the movie that we would like. But it's also a character that it's not needed. That's the thing. I mean, I think that was my main takeaway, was that, yeah, I like her and she's doing fine. She's making me laugh, but it feels almost like they wrote it so that Queen Latifah would be in the movie. Or this character only existed barely in the screenplay, but then once they got Queen Latifah attached to the project, they just blew it up into something else.
Yeah, she could not. I'm trying to think of who that might be where you put Fassbender, just like super serious, bringing him back to earth. So
talking about how much he wants to fuck the car.
Yes, but like again, not at all played for comedy. It's just incredibly awkward. It's a very flimsy shell of a movie, but as we've gone on about for 30 or 40 minutes at this point, there's a lot to take away from it. I would certainly not discourage anyone from checking this movie out.
Yeah, I'm surprised that that we're both as positive as we've been, because I went in expecting much worse just from what I remembered, and just in general, it just doesn't, not just my memory of having watched the movie, but my memory of what the movie was supposed to be. And it turned out that it had enough good stuff in it that it's definitely worth watching. It's also, I mean, I don't know. Now it's even more interesting in the big roadmap of Winona Ryder movies to see, because I remember it as, oh man, Winona was not good in it, but she's actually really good in it. So to see that she had Black Swan in this movie in the same year, and she was just, you know, getting back into it. I mean, before that, I think all she had was like Star Trek, maybe, as far as, you know, big profile releases. And then, like I said, you know, the long climb back would still, you know, it was going to stretch for several years.
Now, wrapping up the dilemma, again, I find myself saying this a lot of times when we cover these just really innocuous movies. You're going to have a hard time finding a more in-depth discussion about The Dilemma starring Vince Vaughn and Kevin James than this podcast. So, Julio, myself, I'd give this movie a C, maybe a C+. This is the type of C that you get that's written very enthusiastically on your test, like a student that
usually gets Fs.
Like, yeah, who's kind of dumb, but you can tell they genuinely gave an effort with this. But it's still like a C work, but it's like it's a good solid C. So yeah, that's what I'll say about it. Where does it fall on the old Oliveira star ranking.
For all the love and the well-deserved love to all the things that work in this movie, I keep thinking about it and it's like, no, but it's inherently flawed. I'll be like, watch it, but it's not good. It's what I told my wife. It's not good. It's just better than I remembered, better than I expected. 2.5 out of 5 stars. You know, but the enthusiastic 2.5 stars. Just like a pat in the back. It's like, you know what? All things considered.
The 2.5 stars that are there, you would outline with like a gold Sharpie.
Yeah.
Yeah. As much as it's funny, the whole discussion has been us like, we'll go forward with how good it has been. No, pull it back because it's still a bad movie. So I think people that never watch or listen to this, like, should I watch it? Should I not? I would recommend doing so.
Yeah, you should watch it.
It does break the Mattis rule of 90 minutes, but at the same time, there is enough good in this movie and enough interesting writing and enough really well acted scenes to warrant at least one viewing.
It gives you, like I was saying, it gives you something to think about. You talk about movies that go in one ear out the other. This one didn't do that. Like I was talking to my wife about that, and I was thinking to myself, it was like, no, yeah, he was in the wrong. Kevin James was 100% in the right. I don't care if I have 3 ulcers going on. If you find out that I'm being cheated on, you tell me right away.
Yeah, good stuff. A surprising stop on the Summer of Winona, providing some relief. As we head into level 5 of the coronavirus in Austin, Texas. So that concludes the dilemma. Up next is Edward Scissorhands, for better or for worse. And moving into our plugs, we're going to do this a little bit differently this week, but we are going to go ahead and give plugs to our usuals, those being the Festive Years, who provide our opening and closing tracks. The opening being Last Stand, closing being Summer of '99. Also providing some supplemental music for the Summer of Winona. So head on over to thefestiveyears.com for any and all Festive Years needs.
Also, you can head on over to mildemonios.pe. That's MILDEMONIOS. That's where you find all of our friend Hans Rodgieser's work. He did our logo. But he does so much more. He's not just an artist. He is a novelist. He's a podcaster. There's a series of zombie novels. The most recent one is Requiem por Lurim. He has 3 podcasts, 2 of them in Spanish. One is about economy called Marginal, and the other one is called Nación Combi, and it's about Peruvian current affairs. Those are available in any podcatcher. You can also check out his podcast in English called Living in Peru on iVox. It's about immigrants to Peru. He probably hasn't seen The Dilemma, and he would probably hate it if he watched it, because actually maybe not. He likes Crazy Stupid Love. That just proves it. That just proves that you can't predict. Hans is like Ron Howard, unpredictable.
Sends us a recorded diatribe of why The Fly sucks, and he likes fucking Crazy Stupid Love. That is one of those movies that I remember specifically when it came out, at least with you and me, and I think Eddie, there was like no discussion. It was just, this fucking sucks. Like, that was immediately what we went to, and just like trashing it. Oh god, it was bad. I was thinking about that movie the other day for some reason, and I got mad about it all over again. Not plugging Crazy Stupid Love. It's one day we may have to do it just so we can like relive our emotions that we went through watching it, because I remember having so much hope for it when the trailer dropped, like, because the cast and like the trailer was great and whatnot. So
yeah, that's, by the way, that's my experience with Rise of Skywalker. I listened to a podcast a couple weeks ago where they were talking about the movie, and it made me angry all over again.
I was on Hinge tonight and just kind of messaging, like, you know, what else are you gonna do during quarantine? I'm gonna try to find some ladies to meet when this all clears up. And it was about Star Wars. Like, Hinge has like questions that your profile has, and then you kind of respond to them. And a girl's like, "Do you like Star Wars?" And I messaged her, "I do. What'd you think of Rise of Skywalker?" And she's like, "I loved it." And I was like, "Well, this is where this conversation ends." So
you got to have some principles.
It's a deal breaker, man.
Yeah.
So lastly, massive shout out to Zoe Perez, who helps curate our social media, specifically our Instagram accounts. She texted me earlier today. It made me laugh on 2 fronts. She's like, "Hey, I'm going to post something for Dracula. I was going to use the word horny in it. Is that okay?" And then she followed it up with, I texted Julio, but he's probably sleeping. And this was like 3 p.m. in the afternoon.
She was 100% correct too.
And she knows both of us well. And I told her, yeah, that's fine. I did want to respond. I was like, we ranked different penis states on John Travolta movies, right? But bless her heart, does some great work on her Instagram page. So we really do appreciate what you do for us, Zoe. So typically this is where we go into plugs of anything we've recently watched, read, played, listened to, etc., etc. This is going to be a bit different. We'll save those for the next episode. This will be out around the 1st of July, so about a week and a half, 2 weeks after the fact. Anyone and everyone in the film industry knows that we lost Joel Schumacher recently. He passed away after a year-long battle with cancer, is what I read. And, we've talked about a lot. I think it's pretty natural for anyone in me and Julio's age range, that's as big as film nerds as we are, to constantly reference, when possible, Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, just from a comedic standpoint. So I know we've talked about that on here. But Joel Schumacher was definitely an unmistakable filmmaker, and he had definitely a signature style that was all his own. So what we wanted to do in lieu of plugs is just do kind of a quick in memoriam of Joel Schumacher. I know I tweeted about it, but legitimately, Falling Down would be in my top 25 movies of all time. That's an incredible movie, just the way it's shot, presented, the commentary it makes, just everything about it is what I would define as a perfect film. And then kind of my mini tribute was I rewatched The Lost Boys the other night, which, man, you want to talk about a movie that's just on the fucking money. Knows how silly it is, leans into it completely. 90 minutes, just, A-list cast. You got Diane Wiest running away from vampires. I mean, what more could you ask for? You got Kiefer Sutherland, just, my God, as hot as a July Texas afternoon, man, in that movie. And not Terry Hatcher. I always forget her name, but she's also in an episode of Seinfeld. The whole point being the man who was at the helm of it, Joel Schumacher, and just like from the opening of that movie, the shots of the water going into the bay, and acquaintance, I guess, of the podcast, John Golson had a great tweet about him, about Schumacher was one of the filmmakers that when you hear the name of his movie, you can think of, like, it brings a visual to mind in terms of like a visual style. And I think we'll go into the Batman movies here in a minute, but I think that was definitely something of his movies that they all had their own look, but they were all very signature to his approach to filmmaking. Julio, what are some of your favorite Schumacher-isms or films that he made?
I've actually answered this question online a couple times because some of our podcasting friends that I follow they were the ones breaking the news to me. I think I spent most of the day not knowing that Joel Schumacher had passed, and then I saw the prompts for, R.I.P. What's your favorite Joel Schumacher movie? And my gut reaction was to say A Time to Kill, even though I haven't seen it in forever. But I remember watching it and it being, this was a long time ago. Who knows if I would even like it now? I want to hope that I would, but I remember at the time being one of those movies that was as good as I wanted it to be from the trailer. I remember thinking the trailer...
That's the best.
Yeah, the trailer looked epic. I didn't know who the fuck Matthew McConaughey was, but he looked like he could carry a movie. Samuel L. Jackson was on fire. Sandra Bullock looked in... I didn't know who she was either, but she looked like... I don't want to say just hot, but she looked like an interesting, like, love interest. And then, Christopher Plummer was in it, kind of like starting his run of playing villains. So it was crazy because it was also one of those movies that it snuck up on me while I was watching how long it was. Because it's like 2.5 hours at least, which I was not expecting at the time from just a legal drama. I think that these days you would, but back then you didn't. So
this was before the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah. It didn't start a franchise either. So I would put a Time to Kill, but honestly, after I already submitted my answers and I was actually looking through his filmography, I remember I really liked Flawless. It's Philip Seymour Hoffman and Robert De Niro.
Oh yeah.
It's not what you think of when you think Joel Schumacher, because I think you think Batman, you think Lost Boys, maybe you think Phantom of the Opera.
Wasn't it more of a comedy?
It's kind of a comedy, but it's also, it's one of those weird like De Niro plays a cop. I'm pretty sure he's a cop that has a stroke. And I think he is at least mildly homophobic. And Philip Seymour Hoffman plays a drag queen. But as part of De Niro's therapy to get his speech back and everything, I think he needs to learn how to sing. They recommend him singing lessons. And they're neighbors. So I think he ends up getting singing lessons from Philip Seymour Hoffman. And you know, kind of like break through at least some of his prejudices. It's Philip Seymour Hoffman as Robert De Niro. So they take what could have been really, really bad and treacly and make it really good. And Schumacher kind of like keeps it all together. From what I remember, again, I haven't seen it in forever. But that movie had... I remember watching the trailer. I was like, nope, pass. This looks like it's going to be a disaster. And then eventually, back when I got on my Robert De Niro kick and I was watching anything that he was in, I finally gave it a shot. And it was pretty good. So that's kind of like the B-side pick. And you know what? Honestly, I'll maybe we've talked about this. I'll go to bat for Batman Forever.
I was about to lean into that or segue into that. So we've had to have talked about this before. I know I've gone to over the moon about the teaser poster for Batman Forever being one of my all-time favorite movie posters. But was that 95 when it came out?
Yes.
95, 96.
So I would have been. I was still in high school, so yeah.
I would have been 8 or 9 because Julio's old. And that was an event when that movie came out. That was like a happening, as Gorilla Monsoon would say. I remember, I have them somewhere still, much like the Street Fighter one. They were giving out trading cards. I have like a Robin one from it for opening day. And the McDonald's had like the special collector's cups and, all the toys and whatnot. And, it's easy to become jaded and look at those movies as being dumb, but they are. But at the same time, watching those movies as a little kid, that's like sensory overload in all the best ways. These bright colors, these actors that you're vaguely familiar with. In my case, I was so huge into Ace Ventura as a little kid. So seeing like Ace Ventura as this ridiculous version of the Riddler, and you think about that, and then you think about Batman and Robin, with Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy and Arnold as Mr. Freeze, but not just these choices of like wild casting, but like the way those movies look to envision that. And yeah, Batman and Robin, that deserves to be a quote along for like some of the worst dialogue ever. But at the same time, when you strip that away, not only just do those movies have a special place in my heart from being a kid and being so excited for them, but like what we had going into that from a film standpoint for Batman was dark and dreary. We had the Tim Burton ones. And then Schumacher not only took it in a whole different direction, but you could say there's really not been any superhero movies like that were that just insane, paint splatter type movies where it's just like you feel like the whole movie's under a blacklight type thing.
Yep.
And if someone like tried to pitch that to a studio today, they'd be like, "What? No, we're not going to do that." And obviously, that was some of the swinging leverage that Schumacher had at the time, just due to his name. But you could argue, and I think opinions vary where people fall on those. Like you said, I would definitely go to bat for Batman Forever. I think there's enough, much like this movie, the dilemma that we talked about. There's enough parts in it that are good, while still being able to acknowledge things that fall apart about it. But it's just the vision for it deserves its own, I think, recognition. I think the idea behind those movies and what he wanted to do with it is admirable. Whether you think the end result of it is good or not, that's fine. And that's something that will be debated, for a long time, I assume.
Yeah, I think that you can argue against the vision, but you can't argue against the talent. It was like, well, he executed it the way that he wanted, and maybe you don't like the end result, like you said, but it's still that takes. This is not he didn't know what the fuck he was doing. I think no, he knew exactly what he was doing. I remember Batman Forever was it might have been the first time I had a crowd erupt into applause at the end of a movie. And it was just when they're backlit and it's just a silhouette of Batman and Robin running towards the screen, and everybody in the theater started like I was like, oh, are we supposed to do this? The power of Joel Schumacher. It did not happen.
We've
with
just
Batman
kind of. I remember just being really confused when that movie was over.
I was in a completely different headspace when I watched Batman and Robin, and also I was looking at the release dates because 95 and 97, and I think a key difference was that I'd gotten back into reading comics by 97, and it's so funny. Growing up as a kid, my Batman was the Adam West Batman.
Mm-hmm.
So when the Burton movies come out, I'm like, what the fuck? This is like really dark and off-putting, and then the Batman Forever comes out, I'm like, all right, this is more like my speed as far as Batman goes. I can appreciate the Burton stuff, but I like this Batman that is funnier and more colorful and all that stuff. But then when Batman and Robin came out, I've been reading comics for a while, and I'm like, yeah, this is not Batman. This is just a sitcom. But still, it's not. But that's not just all he's done. That's the thing. That's what most people will go to because I guess he's.
Just what we've talked about has just been kind of scratching the surface, but with what we're able to discuss, just these few movies of his that we obviously one way or the other are passionate about, I think it speaks to his ability as a filmmaker. The Lost Boys this is the thing I tweeted about. I watched that movie, the made-for-TV version, on like TNT, I think is who owned the distribution rights when I was a little kid. I watched that so much, and like to the point where it was one of those that I was so used to that, and that was the only one I had ever seen. By the time I saw the real version of it, some of like the violence in it like fucking freaked me out. Like when they feed on those like bikers and throw them on the flames and whatnot. So that movie is just like that, and then again, Batman Forever are like embedded parts of my childhood, and then of course becoming older, and some would say I don't have refined taste at all in film, but I'd like to think differently. And then, like I said, really getting into Falling Down and some of his other work. We use a lot of hyperbole on here, but I think he's definitely was a titan of the industry and a heavily influential director and filmmaker.
I was going through his filmography just to see how many I watched, and I think I landed on 15. No, that's not true. 12. Which is, it's not bad, but obviously there's a lot that he made that I wanted to watch. I just never got around to. So, number 23, that's probably the biggest one that Jim Carrey being dark and weird, directed by Joel Schumacher, and somehow I haven't gotten to it.
Phone Booth ruled.
Oh yeah, Phone Booth I watched, and then I think it's Tigerland, the one where the first movie he made with Colin Farrell, which I've always been curious about. The Client is supposed to be good, I guess. Tommy Lee Jones and Susan Sarandon. So there's plenty of Joel Schumacher for me to discover still, which is pretty exciting, and almost as exciting as finding out, as I texted you earlier, that he directed the Kiss from a Rose video for Batman Forever.
Yes, which is nuts, because I knew he did the Smashing Pumpkins, The End is the Beginning is the End video, but the fact that he directed the music videos for both of the smash hits from both of those movies, what a fucking legend, man.
Yep. R.I.P., as they say.
All right, well, that was The Dilemma. Rest easy, Mr. Schumacher. That's going to do it for us here on The Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. And next time, it's Edward Scissorhands. Oh, boy.
Pink towel, short skirt, red heart, love hurts, capsize, you're mine. I got you locked in and loaded. Brown eyes, black tongue, long hair, slow burn, capsize, you're mine, and you don't even know it. She'll make you wish that you could.
Does your cup have your name on it?
It says Alexa Bliss.
Oh, I just saw the Alex part of it, and I was like, you egomaniac.
I do. Have you seen that mug that I have that's like The Office? It's my face with a blue star behind it.
No.
Like, you know what I'm talking about from The Office when they all have those mugs? Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a friend who got one of those for me in college.
That's awesome.